matching tattoo, cause I put it on for you. If you ever start to really win, if you ever find your queen, I hope she lets you down, 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 down. I hope she lets you down, 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 down. But I hope she lets you down, down, down.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
It's 6 o'clock Central African time, which means it's time to rise and shine. Yes, indeed. It is a Wednesday edition, midweek, right here where we are broadcasting from our studios in Johannesburg in South Africa. And if you ever visit Johannesburg, South Africa, and you go towards the center of the city, you will see this tall building that we call Radio Park. And we are right at the bottom in the basement. And we've got an amazing studio, great technicians, great producers, everyone doing amazing things here. To make me and Asanda Beda sound like we know what we're doing. Good morning, Asanda.
We'll fake it until we make it. And we make it at 9 o'clock because that's when we wrap up the show. But we're together for the next 3 hours. A very good morning to you. And then while we're in Radio Park, we get asked about people in TV Park.
Oh, yes.
Everybody thinks we know everybody. Everyone knows everyone here.
Yeah.
And there's like a million of us.
I think last count we're under 3,000 people, SABC across the country.
So it's not possible to know everyone.
Yeah, but you see faces and you recognize them, sort of.
Right, us to cover in this first hour, we'll be looking at South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma, visiting the president of Burkina Faso, the leader there, Ibrahim Traore. They are planning or have started to discuss ways in which Africans can work together better. And in Mali, France has urged its citizens who are there to depart from the country, citing insecurity in terms of what's been happening with Jainim, that Al-Qaeda-linked group there, and how they've blocked fuel from entering the country. So the security crisis seems to be deepening, and there are a lot of worries there. France now joining the US and the UK for calling for their citizens to leave that country. Those stories and more, of course, coming up. Let's start with our news update. It is now exactly 6:01 Central African time. Here's Nolutando Butelezi to get us up to date, and then following her, we'll get a snippet of what's happening in the world of sports with Thikile Lingwati.
SABC News, the African perspective.
Asanda, and good morning. The UN Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, has urged investigations into the killings and other violations committed in the October 29 elections in Tanzania. This as reports emerged that bodies may have been taken by security forces to undisclosed locations. The UN Human Rights Office alleges that hundreds of protesters and other people were killed in the East African country and an unknown number injured or detained. The office says that it has been unable to independently verify the casualty figures owing to the volatile security situation and the internet shutdown which followed the vote. Almost 5 months since the former Zambian President Edgar Lungu died in South Africa, his body is still at the funeral parlor in the country. This is due to the legal battle between the government of Zambia and Lungu's family. However, this matter will soon be resolved. Sophie Mugwena reports.
The family of Edgar Lungu want a private funeral in South Africa, while the government of Zambia wanted to accord Lungu a state funeral in Lusaka as per government policy. This matter that is now in court in Pretoria is likely going to be resolved in the coming days. The government of Zambia is expected to make an announcement that the case will no longer continue and will give Lungu's family a chance to decide on what will happen to the burial of the former Zambian president.
The South African Police Service says that a multidisciplinary integrated plan is in place to deal with any forms of lawlessness prior and during the G20 World Leaders Summit. Over 25,000 guests, including heads of states from all over the world, are expected to attend the summit in Johannesburg from the 22nd of this month. Acting Gauteng Police Commissioner Major General Fred Gekana says that they are working with all relevant stakeholders to ensure the safety of the delegates and the citizens.
We have integrated plans that it's collaborative. All necessary role players to ensure from road safety to venue safety to food security and protection, including police visibility and the safety of all the visitors, including those who will just be visiting the country and the province. We are ready. Everything is in place.
The first vaccine to be entirely manufactured in South Africa in over 50 years has been launched at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto, south of Johannesburg. BioVac and the South African Medical Research Council says that the oral cholera vaccine was developed from start to finish locally. The first phase of the clinical trials has now started. The initiative marks a major milestone for local science and public health. Cholera outbreaks continue to threaten communities across Africa. The Health Minister, Aaron Motsoaledi.
Nowhere on the African continent, nowhere, I repeat, do we find a pharmaceutical company that can manufacture vaccines right from the scratch, end to end. This is the first on our African continent. Of course, we are hoping that it won't be the last, but it will be the first. And that's why we are so excited about it, because it's history making.
An Israeli bill proposing the death penalty for those deemed to be terrorists has passed its first reading in Parliament. It was tabled by the far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who threatened to withdraw his party from government if it wasn't voted on. The BBC says that the punishment is likely to be used only against Palestinians convicted of deadly attacks on Israelis. For any news stories that you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In a sports headline, Bafana head coach wants to win against Zambia at all costs, and the Italian Tennis Federation, ATP, are mourning the death of two fans. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Every morning after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you something called the Africa Roundup. And essentially what it is to reflect on the stories and the events of the past 24 hours. And we bring them to you in a concise form so that you are all caught up and prepared for the news day ahead. And we begin with this story that schools in Mali's capital, Bamako, have reopened this week after a 2-week closure that was triggered by a nationwide fuel shortage. This disruption had halted public transport and left teachers and students stranded at home. As Diane Tor reports, just to let you know, we'll be doing that story in a bit more detail later on.
The government temporarily closed schools last month as part of emergency measures to deal with a fuel supply crisis after an al-Qaeda-linked jihadist group began attacking tankers and blocking imports in September. At this Bamako high school, students lined up to register and copy new timetables as lessons resumed. A school supervisor said everything was going well, with students and teachers able to show up for class. Although math teacher Idrissa Sanago said the disruption would make it harder to complete the year's curriculum.
Because the school year is already tight at 9 months, we even started a bit late. And with this interruption again, it will put us even further behind. We will try to do our best to catch up, but it won't be easy.
The United Nations says more than 1 billion firearms are now in circulation across the world. Addressing the Security Council, Adedeji Ebo, the UN's Deputy High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, warned that the spread of weapons is both fueling and reflecting the many security crises facing the globe.
In Africa, illicit flows of small arms and light weapons in West Africa and the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and the Great Lakes region contribute to a systemic crisis, transforming localized violence into even more complex cross-border conflicts. As the African Union High Representative for Silencing the Guns, and my co-briefer today, Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers, has rightly pointed out at the Security Council Area Formula meeting on small arms and light weapons in March, also convened by Sierra Leone. This crisis is not only an issue of weak supply chains, but a symptom of deep-seated governance crisis.
Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema has reaffirmed his government's commitment to attracting investment, particularly in the energy sector, which he says is key to driving economic growth. He was speaking at a State House in Lusaka, where he met a delegation of 7 Chinese companies affiliated with Trinidad Power China.
I see you're talking about rural energy, small, capacity, generating capacity, and obviously to distribute to the customers. That is welcome. So we're looking for small projects, micro if you want, small, medium, large projects. They are all welcome. They have space in our economy, in our energy sector, because I think with energy we can drive then the whole agenda to grow the economy. And if I may extend from there, obviously the issues around EV is important because yes, it's green, it's environmentally friendly, but it also reduces the consumption of fossil fuels.
Staying in Zambia, the European Union has pledged 50 million euros to support the rehabilitation of Zambia's railway line from Livingstone to Ndoro. The project is expected to boost regional trade, cut transport costs, and strengthen Zambia's role as a logistics hub in Southern Africa. Transport and Logistics Minister Frank Tayali says the initiative is a key part of the country's economic transformation agenda.
I do want to express our profound gratitude to the European Union and cooperating partners under the Global Gateway Initiative for this strategic and timely grant commitment support towards track improvement of Zambia Railways Limited. This investment is not only a vote of confidence in our national vision for a modern, efficient transport system, but also a tangible demonstration of the deepening partnership between Zambia and the European Union.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. Of course, this comes after the 6 a.m. news on Rise and Shine, so be sure to look out for one for tomorrow. But in the meantime, we'll delve deeper into some of those stories touched on this Africa Roundup as we zoom into what's happening in the West African region of our continent, getting analysis there from Dr. David Matsanga, political scientist and conflict resolution analyst. He'll be in conversation with our colleague Peter. Stay tuned.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
O Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Okay. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. músicos. Lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
And indeed, it's a very good morning to you. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Rise and Shine. And right now, it's time for the West Africa Wrap. And today we take you across the region to unpack the latest developments there that are shaking West Africa, from security crises and transport disruptions in the Sahel to shifting political allegiances, border closures, and the rumblings of new national ambitions. And joining us, as usual, is Dr. David Matsanga, who's a political scientist and specialist in conflict resolution and is a long-time observer of African affairs. A very good morning to you, Dr. Matsanga. Always good to have you on the program.
Good morning, Peter Ndoro. Good morning, the rest of my fellow Africans. I am in Bamako, Mali, in the heart of Africa and West Africa, where civilization started.
And it's so good to hear that, because that's our first story today. We're hearing that schools have reopened. Is this an indication that the authorities, security officials, have started to get a handle on the security situation there? Are things improving?
Yes, things are improving. The three countries are working day and night. The younger man in Burkina Faso, the general in Niger, and the general down here in Bamako. These three people are working hand in hand. If there was any unity, type of unity that we can get in Africa, this is the type of unity that you touch one of them, the rest of them come. So lots and lots of petrol and the fuel was brought across from those countries slowly, until hundreds and hundreds came through another route. They arrived and the people started, petrol issue was eased off. Back on the frontier, where we are, about 100 to 200 kilometers away from here, there is a blockade by Al-Qaeda remnants. There is a blockade by ISIS, all terrorist groups that have emerged or been sent away from other places in the Middle East, and they are here. And you know, Peter, I told you the other time that there is something strange going on here. Algeria and Mali have been great friends. There have never been any stoppage of food, stuffs, transport, and whatever it is. But now the French, after being chased away from almost all their states in Africa, they have gone back to Beda land, the land of Beda, Algeria, tried to use a silent diplomacy to frustrate Mali. But this, as Africans, Algeria was a land of liberation. It should not be in bed with a colonial master who has milked Africa for years and years and hundreds of years to frustrate Mali. Some of us are here to persuade. Some of us are here to look for better Africa. The biggest problem here is one state called Nigeria, and I'll tell you why. It is one of those that France is using to create chaos in these smaller states that decided to call it a day from ECOWAS. That is the situation on the ground here, Peter.
You've talked about ECOWAS. Yes, there's no love lost. Losing France as an ally or colonial power, probably a better description. I am curious, though, this tripartite alliance between Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, is it sufficient to ward off these extremists, or are they missing some of the muscle of ECOWAS?
I think extremists, ECOWAS is zero. ECOWAS, the last assignment, Peter, that it did was the assignment of removing Yaya Jammeh. And with the help of my satellite radio station, and which I took, and Yaya Jammeh was threatened. He didn't know what was going on, how it was talking, who was talking. And that's all. But let me tell you, ECOWAS is zero, is gone. ECOWAS is manned by the French. ECOWAS coughs France. ECOWAS eats France. ECOWAS talks France. If France does not pay money for ECOWAS activities, apart from the building in Nigeria, in Abuja, what else has ECOWAS got of its own? Nothing. It again begs money from European Union, the same people who don't want these smaller countries. There's nothing ECOWAS can do at the moment. ECOWAS itself cannot mobilize troops to send one contingent of troops to tackle the insurgency, the terrorism that is spreading from Nigeria as a hotbed of fanaticism, a hotbed of lunatics, fanatics who want to kill people because they are moderate Muslims and kill people because they are Christians. That center there is which is breeding all the confusion that we see in Sahara region. So whoever is going to wipe out this menace in that region must begin by hitting very hard, deep down in Nigeria to get rid of this Boko Haram whose images are seen right from the top, wherever you can be.
All right, so last question on Mali, and we'll go back where we started with the situation on the ground, because we're seeing France, the United States, urging its citizens to leave the country for security reasons. And we're also seeing the African Union saying urgent attention is required, and urgent action from the international is required in Mali. From where you are sitting and seeing, is this an overreaction? Are people safe? Do the nationals of France and the United States need to leave? And is there urgent international action required in Mali right now?
Peter, what kills Africa today is those alerts. These guys bring NGOs to us. These guys fund some of this terrorism, like France allegedly has been part and past quoted. Investigative journalists like us, people who go behind the scenes, we have discovered that France, out of the annoyance, they seem to be not bothering about terrorism that is growing around the Libyan, south of Libya and the north of Mali. They seem to be. Who is funding General Khalifa Haftar? Who? It is France. Sarkozy, General Khalifa Haftar, ICC, they know the problems of that army. There is an army there, an outstanding army of 30,000 overmen, south of Libya, that disorganized that area, specialized in disorganization, mercenary types of things. And nobody talks about this. South Libya is divided into two countries. So these countries give alerts, give messages of people departing, get out. They safeguard their citizens. They leave us Africans dying. The same thing they are doing right in East Africa, down in Tanzania. They tell people to leave. But they are organizations, NGOs, are the ones funding these problems. And Africans must stand up and speak against these NGOs that come and give younger men money to demonstrate around Africa. Then tell your citizens to go pack your passport and go back to America, go back to France, when you have already are we animals to be killed like that? This is the time that some of the African countries must take a stand and say, oh, even some of your citizens have to remain here. You know, when they say they do that, they are trying now to bring and start a war in that region. You know, their machines cannot keep quiet. Their machines must be working. Their soldiers on the sea must be seen doing some action. Their soldiers in bases must be seen. So, Peter Ndoro, alerts of that nature, we must investigate, even the NGOs that bring us chaos.
All right, let's talk about Burkina Faso, because President Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa, met with Ibrahim Traore. What's your take on this meeting? They said that it was to discuss what they described as Africa's true liberation. Your thoughts on this meeting of these two people?
Peter Ndoro, you are bringing me to a very controversial issue. Me, Zuma, you trust Zuma to come, and I have told Traore, I am with, you know, with these younger people, I tell them, Traore, you don't know much history. Me, if I were Traore, I would not bring President Zuma closer to me. Yes, I don't want to reveal anything here, but let me keep quiet. We know what true liberation is it? What true liberation is he going to teach Traore? Is he going there as an envoy? Is he an African AU envoy? What true? Is he just going there to spy for France? I told Traore, and I'm a frank man. I tell the truth. I told this young man that please be careful. The more of these people come here, some of them come with double agent labels. They are trying to find out. You remember who was the best friend of Gaddafi? Isn't it Zuma? Isn't it Zuma? If Mandela had been alive, would Gaddafi die? You people in Africa, watch her. This man, I am maybe I'm a prophet, but my brother, I'm telling you, I have discouraged that beast, and I don't think he will go back there again.
Wow. Okay, we'll leave it there. You've said enough, I think, for people to dig and try and connect.
Remember, Peter, remember Resolution 1973 of the United Nations Security Council. Who voted? Who voted? Who told the ambassador and you went to vote? Who? If the ambassador had abstained, we would not have Libya. Germany abstained. Brazil abstained. India abstained. Why didn't South Africa abstain? Africans forget so easily.
It's very interesting, and thank you for reminding us. Actually, it was an interesting time, I remember for sure. So, another former junta leader, state, Guinea, the military leader, Mamadi Doumbouya, has been cleared to run in next month's presidential election. He had said he's going to hand over to a civilian government. What are your thoughts on this? Because we've seen coups, military leaders enjoy leadership for a while, and then they don't want to go back to the base.
Let me tell you, Peter, there are two men who took over power whom I don't want it even to meet. That one of Guinea Conakry and the one in Gabon. These are stooges of the French hegemony in Africa. They just did it for France. You can see even Trump singled him out and singled another one who has just learned how to wear suits in Gabon. And with showing us his beautiful wife while he's beating up people, and his fellow friend who gave him the job is languishing in a house arrest, no treatment. Useless people. That one there, Conde, is suffering in the house, no medical treatment, useless. These are French Moors who came to African continent. They said they had changed the government civilian and they became more corrupt. Instead, they also changed to amass wealth. They are different from Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore. different from the Niger, different from Goita. These Goita are fighting insurgents. These ones are Moors, French Moors, and they have been put on lock and lock key by the French, who use them as satellite systems to even find intelligence about other countries in Africa.
Right.
So,
we're running out of time, so I'm going to jump to our last bit because I do want us to end on a positive note. Ghana appearing closer than ever to establishing a national airline. How important are national airlines, countries flying airlines under their flag?
I am very, very happy. I was in Ghana a few days ago, and when I met foreign minister and other people in the capital city, they say Ghana is coming back. That's what they are saying. Ghana is coming back. I am very impressed, and I want to tell the Ghanaians, an airline is the pride of their nation. An airline is the pride of Africa. It will shorten. For example, to reach Bamako, you must wait for several hours through either Istanbul or through Paris to come to Bamako. But if we had an airline, Ghanaian airline, flying into Bamako, I would have come here much earlier, done my work and left and gone back to where I want. This is great news for Africa. This and the airlines that are still operating in Africa. Take the example of Ethiopia. Take the example of
I wish
Rwanda.
we could carry on and talk much more, but I think the message has landed. Great development, and it looks like a good sign in terms of the direction that Ghana is going. Dr. Matsanga, always great talking to you. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you same time next week.
Welcome, Peter. Welcome back. I don't know where you had gone, but we must still stand by our countries in Africa. I stand by the people of Tanzania to keep the unity of Tanzania. I will support them. If you take them to the ICC, Peter, I will defend Tanzania up to the last moment. Goodbye, good morning. I am prepared to die for the unity of Nyerere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much indeed. That's Dr. David Matsanga, regular commentator on West African affairs. And that takes us to 6:30, which means it's time for the news headlines with Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Women are fleeing Sudan's Al-Fashir city amid reports of killings, systematic rape and the disappearance of their children. This following the region's capture by the paramilitary rapid support forces. The United Nations, meanwhile, the office is saying that it believes hundreds of people were killed in Tanzania in protests that erupted during last month's elections. And the Democrat governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has strongly criticized deadly U.S. strikes on alleged narco-trafficking vessels in the Caribbean. I'll have details at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, as we enter now our sports update, just a reminder that our analysts who join us for our wraps in the after the Africa Roundup on Rise and Shine, and the views they express are not those as reflected by Channel Africa. They are our independent analysts and experts, and we get their opinions on things, so they represent themselves. Let's go to sports. Here's Fikile Lingwati now. Good morning.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Asanda. Let's kick off with football. The head coach of South Africa's men's national football team, Hugo Broos, says a win against Zambia in an international friendly on Saturday is crucial for the team to maintain their top 10 ranking in the African rankings.
Preparation for the game of Saturday, friendly game, but for me, friendly games don't exist. Every game we have to be focused and concentrated and trying to win that game, and it will not be different for this game. I want to win on Saturday.
Morocco has become the latest African member association beneficiary of the FIFA Arena project following the inauguration of the mini pitch Meknes north of the country. The facility at the Halima Al Sadia School is the first in the North African country and is expected to serve over 2,000 students from neighboring schools, including Hay Salam School, Salah Eddin Al Yubi School, and I Mofgadali High School. The Halima Sadai School in Meknes will benefit from the modern and sustainable facility, which will offer students a safe and motivating space to play football. On to tennis news. The Italian Tennis Federation, FITP, and the ATP have confirmed that 2 spectators died from cardiac arrest at the ATP finals on Monday. The individuals were aged 70 and 78, and the incidents occurred at different times at the Inalpi Arena in Turin. The first singles match of the day between Italy's Lorenzo Musetti and American Taylor Fritz was delayed with an announcement confirming there was a medical situation in the crowd. The ATP finals are taking place until the 16th of November at the 12,000 capacity venue. We end with more tennis news. Tunisia's former world number 2, Ons Jabeur, says she's expecting her first child and will take an extended break from professional tennis. A 31-year-old, currently ranked 79th, added that she would be setting aside her career temporarily to focus on a new family life as she's expecting a baby boy in April. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figure Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
The United States was very vocal at the beginning of South Africa's G20 presidency, and this is largely due to strained relations with South Africa at the time, that they were not really keen on participating. Where do they stand right now?
The U.S. is planning to take over the presidency of the G20 next year, and our understanding from them is that they intend to continue to do so, and therefore it is quite difficult then to be in a situation where you are not attending deputies' meetings or discussions during our presidency and then to take over the presidency next year. From a finance track perspective, there has been engagement. We've been working on a communique last week and this week here in Zimbabwe. What's important about that is that it's a consensus document. And so all the members in the room have to agree to the language that is used there. And our US colleagues have been part of those discussions and negotiations.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Right, it's time to find out what's happening in the world of business as we say good morning to Nosipo Zulu.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa has urged the government not to continue with the proposed tax law amendments in their current form. Finance Minister Noko Dongwana is preparing to deliver his medium-term budget policy statement today. Treasury is proposing VAT amendments that could affect schools that offer services such as renting their facilities, running tuck shops, and others. The law proposed that if revenue from these services is above $58,000 annually, schools are obliged to register as VAT vendors. Some role players have stressed that the amendment will also push up fees. Lebogang Monjane is the Executive Director of the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa.
The impact is that it will increase fees for many member schools. And the difficulty with fee increases that increase too high is this. Education inflation is always higher than national inflation. So really it is important that this proposal not go through.
The VAT amendment is proposed to come into effect on the 1st of January next year. Tax expert Diego Mogoba says this could have major financial implications for schools.
When the tax practitioner is doing calculation, he's going to use the methodology of proportionate and see how many percent is things called commercial. And then based on that, let's say it's 95% commission, and then he's going to calculate based on that, and then he's going to deduct the input, and then the school will have to pay SARS.
South Africa's Johannesburg Mayor Dada Morero says out of the 500 traders listed during the court proceedings in its case against the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, only 93 people have stepped forward to register. Now, the case centered around the removal of informal traders from the Johannesburg city centre. The High Court in Johannesburg has ordered the city to complete a verification and registration process for informal traders within 2 weeks. Morero says the drop in the number of traders willing to register supports the city's assertion that many of them were operating illegally.
The entire 93 are South African citizens, and indeed will be allocating them proper spaces where they should be trading. We're given 18 days to conclude that process, but till today, since we started, it's only 93 that has come through, which says the city was correct to say that the bulk of those that were trading here were trading illegally and did not even have permits, and they were in the spaces that were not meant for trading.
Zambia and Israel have reaffirmed their commitment to enhance existing bilateral relations. President Isaac Herzog met his Zambian counterpart Hakainde Hichilema on Monday in Lusaka, becoming the first Israeli president to visit the southern African country. Now, among other things, the two discussed ways to strengthen collaboration in agriculture and technology, trade and investment. President Hichilema explains.
We want to move very, very rapidly in putting close to 500,000 hectares of our land under irrigation, and our cooperation means a lot in this area. So we can have food security, not just for ourselves, but for the region as well.
And finally, the rate of UK unemployment has risen to 5% in the 3 months to September, showing signs the jobs market has weakened. The Office for National Statistics say this is the highest rate since the period covering December 2020 to February 2021, boosting expectations of a December interest rate cut. The increase in the unemployment rate was higher than expected, coming in above the 4.9% projected by many analysts ahead of the budget on the 26th of November. Average wage growth was 4.6% in the third quarter, down from 4.7% over the 3 months to August. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 435. In Botswana is 13.26. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 35, and in Zambia is 22.61. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 32. Russia is 80 rubles 86, India is 88 rupees 68, China at 7.12, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 20. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,124 and platinum at $1,582 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $62.06 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusipho Suma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Our fact for today: South Africa holds the G20 presidency from December 1st, 2024, focusing on solidarity, equality and sustainability. Priorities include Africa's development agenda, inclusive growth, debt sustainability, climate finance and critical minerals. The 2025 Leaders Summit will be in Johannesburg on November 22nd to the 23rd. Did you know that? Well, that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality and sustainability.
In what's being described as an historic achievement, South Africa has manufactured its first vaccine in more than 50 years. The country's health minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, says that the development of the oral cholera vaccine will reduce the country's reliance on international pharmaceutical companies and strengthen its ability to respond to future health crises. Dr. Motsoaledi was speaking at the launch of the vaccine's clinical trials at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto, Johannesburg. Calvin Mabasa has more.
Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi has described the first South African vaccine as a milestone that will ensure citizens are not left behind should another pandemic strike. The minister recalled the challenges South Africa faced in securing vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic. He says the oral cholera vaccine represents a key step in reclaiming the country's ability to protect lives and quickly respond to public health threats.
The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the dangers of this dependence, where access to life-saving vaccines was often determined not by need, but by geography and global inequities. Today, we take a decisive step towards changing that story. We changing our own story and writing our new chapter in history. Building local vaccine manufacturing capability is not just a luxury, it is a national necessity. It strengthens our sovereignty, enhances our health security, and ensures that our people are not left behind.
Gauteng Department of Health's MEC Nomantunko Moralehuku has welcomed the launch, saying it will help save lives.
Vaccine will help us indeed in terms of preventing whatever diseases that have been happening. You remember last year the number of people that we had to lose because of cholera. Now at least we know that there is this launch of this new vaccine that is going to help us.
The oral cholera vaccine, created locally by BioVac in collaboration with the South African Medical Research Council, started development in 2022 and has now entered its first phase of clinical trials to test its effectiveness against cholera. BioVac CEO Dr. Morena Makwana says this trial will test South Africa's ability to develop vaccine from scratch and be prepared for future pandemics.
Outbreaks of cholera. It does two things. The first thing that it does is that it prepares us for outbreaks and pandemics. So whilst we don't have a big cholera outbreak, but we need to be pandemic ready, we need to be outbreak ready. So when the next pandemic, this really would be a test about whether we can develop products from scratch and we can be able to be...
Participants in the clinical trial say they have not experienced any negative side effects so far. Its manufacturers say it is targeting markets beyond South Africa, while government officials stress that providing clean drinking water remains a national priority. Calvin Mabasa, SABC News in Johannesburg.
In the last hour of the show, just after 8 o'clock, we'll be discussing medicine manufacturing in Africa, trying to answer questions on what would it take for Africa to produce its own medicines.
Now, let's go to South Africa's Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, who will today table the medium-term budget policy statement, the mid-year update that outlines how government plans to manage spending, borrowing and growth over the next 3 years. The MTBPS comes, or that's the medium-term budget policy statement, comes against a difficult backdrop of weak economic growth, high debt, revenue shortfalls and mounting pressure on social spending. To help us unpack what this all means, we're joined by economist and director at Econometrics, Dr. Azar Jammine. Dr. Jammine, thank you for joining us. How are you on this particular Wednesday?
I'm well, thank you, and greetings to you and your listeners.
Well, let's start with what the purpose of this mid-term budget statement actually is.
We never used to have it 30, 40 years ago. It was introduced in the late 1990s as a kind of a stopgap interim way of basically budgeting for the next 3 years. It doesn't include major tax changes or no decisions on tax changes are included, but it does basically provide a stopgap between the annual budgets that are usually tabled in February, and it essentially sets out what the government expects the economy to do, in what growth rates, what inflation rates, how much government revenue it anticipates over the next 3 years, and how it's going to finance that.
Do you expect this budget to be about monetary policy as well in terms of the 3% inflation target?
There have been rumors to suggest that the Reserve Bank's or the preferred inflation target announced by the Reserve Bank in July, which was a downward revision from the midpoint of the previous inflation target of 3 to 6% down to 3%. There have been rumors suggesting that the National Treasury will officially suggest that the government intends reducing the inflation target to 3%. There's been a big debate as to whether or not this is justified. The Reserve Bank has been adamant that this will help to reduce the inflation rate from a medium to longer point of view, and through this help to result in lower interest rates than might otherwise have prevailed. But there have been a lot of opponents to this as well. The National Treasury itself came out with a statement back in August to suggest that it was not the prerogative of the Reserve Bank to decide what the inflation target would be, but that of the government itself. But since then, I believe there have been talks between the two, and there is a fair chance that the National Treasury might announce a downward revision of the inflation target in today's medium-term budget policy statement.
So South Africa also being removed from the grey list is a welcomed relief. What will this mean then for cost of debt, if at all, given that debt service costs are now one of the fastest growing items on the budget?
The benefits of removal from the grey list, I think, have already been manifested. The fact is that many people anticipated the removal from the grey list. We were actually it was brought to our attention about 4 months ago that South Africa had actually fulfilled all 22 requirements from the FATF to actually get off the grey list. And that, in turn, has actually been one of the factors contributing towards the rand's substantial appreciation over the course of this year, the anticipation of a removal from the grey list. So that in itself has already resulted in a diminution in government debt servicing costs, which have paved the way for the government to run a lower budget deficit than previously anticipated, and or use the money for that it would have been spending on paying interest to use it for other ends.
We understand we are heading for another budget surplus, and what does this mean? And are we on target in terms of revenue and taxation?
I think one must be careful in saying we're heading for another budget surplus. We're still running budget deficits. The surplus one is talking about is what is called the primary surplus. That is, what is the difference between revenue and expenditure after payment of interest. If you include interest payments on government debt, then we are still running a budget deficit. But nonetheless, what we are seeing is an overrun in government revenue compared with what was expected earlier in the year. The South African Revenue Services has improved its revenue-raising capability, has tightened up on its processes. Secondly, mineral prices have soared to all-time highs, especially the price of gold, but also we've seen significant increases in the prices of platinum and palladium and rhodium. and all that will bring additional tax revenue from the upward move in profits of those companies extracting those minerals. And although the combination of those factors should result in higher government revenue than previously anticipated.
Are you happy with the reforms government has been highlighting, particularly with the example of the Vulindlela program as it pertains to growth in the country?
The Vulindlela program is well focused and well directed at the right things that are needed for structural reforms, but they don't cover some of the other areas of structural reform that are required. In other words, what basically they are focused on improving electricity supply, improving logistics and their efficiency, especially at our ports and railways. Water supply is also being improved, and Vulindlela has more recently been focusing on trying to increase the competence of municipalities, but it still does leave a number of gaps that need to be addressed. The weak educational outcomes in the country, the high levels of crime, and especially criminal syndicates that are impairing the ability of the government to embark upon infrastructural investment programs. And it doesn't do much about trying to promote small business activity in an environment in where the business sector is dominated by big businesses and powerful governments and large trade unions.
As we talk of the business sector, do you have any concerns about the narrative of the U.S. about South Africa as it might dissuade investment into the country? They're not even sending any delegates to the G20 that we are hosting.
Yeah, they may not be sending any delegates to G20, but I don't know that investment by the United States is the most important area of our economy. Our biggest investors and trading partners are Europe and China, and to some growing one with India as well. Those are the more relevant areas. Yes, of course, one is concerned about the impairment of relations between South Africa and the United States, but all I'm saying is that they are not the most important relations that we have with other countries.
So then the timing of this midterm budget, there is the G20 summit in the country that we're hosting, as we say, this month. How important is the timing of this address by Minister Enoch Godongwana with that backdrop in terms of the plans he puts forward for the country as the world watches and gathers?
I don't think that it's going to matter what the timing is in terms of its coinciding with the G20. The medium-term budget policy statement was always going to be presented around this time. The fact that it happens to coincide with the G20, I don't think G20 countries will be all that bothered about what is seen as an internal budgeting process here. I think we need to just go ahead with it as we normally do.
Your closing remarks, Doctor, as far as your expectations from Minister Godongwana?
I think he's going to make remarks to try and persuade people that the government is still very determined to embark upon fiscal discipline. And there have been suggestions that after what is expected to be a relatively upbeat medium-term budget policy statement, South Africa might receive an upgrade of its credit rating from 3 notches below investment grade to 2 notches below investment grade. And that would help the process of bringing down long-term interest rates still further, helping to generate a virtuous circle of lower debt servicing costs, smaller budget deficits, less of an increase in public debt, and a generally positive view from that point of view. But over and above that, it has to try and persuade the general public that the government is determined in its efforts to improve the growth rate of the economy.
Doctor, thank you so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. That's economist and director at Econometrics, Dr. Azar Jamin, as we look forward in South Africa to the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana's midterm budget statement.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa. From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
We enter the second hour now of Rise and Shine. If you've just joined us, good morning to you and thank you for doing just that. We are Channel Africa and we bring you news and current affairs from the African perspective, broadcasting via www.channelafrica.co.za. On YouTube, we're live streaming at Channel Africa 1 is the handle, and you can find us on the SABC Plus app via your mobile phones. I'm Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro, and coming up in this hour, we're going to be taking a look at a few things, but a couple of items that certainly I think really are concerning. One of them is the UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has called for urgent investigations into the 29 October election violence that took place in Tanzania, with reports that hundreds of people may have been killed by Tanzanian authorities. And we believe that as many as 150 opposition figures are currently in detention in the country. So serious concern about what's happening in Tanzania. And of course, COP30 kicked off on Monday in Brazil. And we'll get some updates on what's been discussed so far and what promises and hopes that there are for COP30 coming out of that gathering. All right, let's start though this hour with news with Nolutando Buthelezi and sports headlines with Fikile Lingwat.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. Women are fleeing Sudan's Al-Fashir city amid reports of killings, systematic rape and disappearance of their children. This follows the region's capture by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Al-Fashir's fall on the 26th of October has cemented the RSF's control of the Darfur region in its 2.5-year war with the Sudanese army. People fleeing the city have described civilians being shot in the streets and attacked in drone strikes. The UN Women Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, Anna Mudavadi, says that there is mounting evidence that rape is being deliberately and systematically used as a weapon of war. She expressed concern over the lack of safe spaces and the limited access to even the most basic psychosocial care. The former president of Malawi, Dr. Bakili Muluzi, says that he has discontinued his mediation between the Zambian government and the bereaved family of the country's former president Edgar Lungu. Muluzi was heading a team which would have led to Lungu's body being repatriated from Pretoria to Lusaka. Sophie Mukwena reports.
Moluzi has thanked all stakeholders in the matter, including religious leaders and the South African government, for supporting efforts to get an agreement on the repatriation of the former president Edgar Lungu's body. The mediation team has withdrawn from the mediation process due to the inability to reach a conclusive pathway forward. Muluzi says the mediation is formally returning the matter to the family, Zambian people, Zambian government, and other stakeholders. Sophie Mukwena, SABC News.
Ethiopia says that it will host the United Nations COP32 climate summit in 2027, fending off a rival bid from Nigeria to land an influential role that will allow it to shape the agenda and outcomes of the event. The more immediate choice to host for next year's COP31 remains unresolved, however, with both Australia and Turkey vying for it. COP host countries adopt a presidency role which allows them to set goals for the summit and showcase their own climate issues, as well as an important position in resolving any conflicts that arise during negotiations. At a plenary session of this year's event in Brazil, Ethiopia confirmed that it had been endorsed by fellow African nations to hold the 2027 conference in its capital, Addis Ababa. The United Nations Human Rights Office says that it believes hundreds of people were killed in Tanzania in protests that erupted during last month's elections. It also says that unknown numbers of people were injured or rather detained. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner after garnering nearly 98% of the vote. The BBC's Bernadette Keho reports.
Tanzania's opposition has slammed last month's vote as a sham. President Samia faced little opposition after her two leading challengers were disqualified. The UN human rights chief, Volker Turk, said there were reports security forces had removed bodies from streets and hospitals and taken them to undisclosed locations in an attempt to conceal evidence. He called on the authorities to provide information about the whereabouts of all the missing, to hand over bodies and hold those responsible for human rights violations to account.
The Democrat governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has strongly criticized deadly U.S. strikes on alleged narco-trafficking vessels in the Caribbean. The U.S. has now struck at least 19 vessels, killing around 80 people. The BBC's Lone Wells has the details.
Speaking at a press conference at the COP30 climate summit in Brazil, Governor Gavin Newsom said it was chilling to see the United States blowing up boats with no transparency and no consent of Congress. The US government says it is targeting narco-terrorists, though many observers believe the military build-up is an attempt to put pressure on Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. The arrival of the world's largest warship sparked further fears of escalation in the region on Tuesday, as speculation has been mounting about whether the US will carry out direct strikes on Venezuelan soil. Venezuela has announced a major nationwide military deployment to counter the US naval presence off its coast.
For any news stories that you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, the Springbok star receives a ban for a red card against France. And the Zimbabwe Football Association explains the omission of former PSL stars. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
The United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has called for urgent investigations into killings and other alleged violations that are linked to Tanzania's 29 October elections. Reports suggest that hundreds may have been killed, with bodies reportedly taken to undisclosed locations by security forces. More than 150 opposition figures are believed to be, and other individuals are believed to be in detention at this time, with some charged with treason. We'll speak now to Saif Magango, who's the spokesperson for the UN Human Rights Office in Nairobi in Kenya, for a little bit more clarity on these developments. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder if you could walk us through some of the evidence that you've been able to gather in terms of the killings that have taken place in Tanzania, particularly around the 29th and the elections in Tanzania. What have you been able to gather, and what do we know?
Yes, of course, you all are aware that the election took place on the 29th, but the situation really deteriorated on election eve on the 28th. From that day until to date, we are receiving information, really distressing information about extraordinary human rights violations that have taken place in the country in the context of the elections. Hundreds have been killed, from what we gather. It is very difficult to verify information because as soon as these events started to unfold, the authorities in Tanzania imposed an internet shutdown. And but we have been receiving information from multiple sources in the country to the effect that hundreds of people have been killed. And others have been arrested, and no number detained. Many of them we believe arbitrarily because they're all being charged with treason. Some of them simply for things they've said, which are protected under international law. They have the right to express themselves and to associate and to assemble peacefully. So that's what we're hearing, and we would like for the Tanzanian authorities to take steps to reveal the truth through investigations that are full and transparent and impartial.
Have you been able to engage with the Tanzanian authorities? And if so, what have they been telling you?
Well, we were in touch with the Tanzanian authorities prior to the elections because we saw signs starting to emerge of a situation that would be undesirable. When the opposition candidates were prevented from taking part in the elections, when the media crackdowns were ongoing, when all these things, threats from the police or police leadership that they would crack down on protests, all of these events gave us a reason to believe that the election there might be human rights violations and abuses in the context of the elections, and reached out to the authorities to express our concerns. During the period following the elections, it has not been possible for us to directly engage with them. But we are reaching out in the public sphere through these programs such as these to perform our mandate, which is to protect and promote human rights and to bring to the attention of the world what is happening, but also to appeal to the authorities to do what is their obligation under international law, which they've signed up for, to ensure that people are not killed because of an election. An election should not be a cause for all the bloodshed and the arrests and the injuries that we have seen in the country.
If what the allegations are being leveled are true about what the authorities and security forces may have done, surely it's going to be nigh impossible to get the Tanzanian authorities to do any kind of due process with any kind of transparency. Who should be investigating what happened in Tanzania?
Well, in the first instance, it should be the authorities in Tanzania, because they are under obligation under international law, but under their own constitution, to ensure that to protect people and their property. And in this case, they shut down the internet in what looks like an attempt to cover up the evidence. We want them to reconsider that, because they have the resources, they have the means, and they have the authority to tell the Tanzanian people who was killed, where, why, and to reveal the truth and to start to ensure justice and accountability for what has happened. It is not they should not, under any circumstances, sweep this under the carpet, because it is not ideal for healing, for reconciliation, because, and we believe that perhaps this is, depending on how they address this, it will define how they move forward. And that's why absolutely we, as in our mandate as the UN Human Rights Office, is to remind them of the obligations and to ensure that they do the right thing, because only the right thing will lead to a long-term and sustainable solution to what is happening and afflicting the country in this moment.
All right. Again, maybe let me ask in a different way. If they don't investigate, if they don't do the right thing themselves, is there international law, international pressure that can force justice?
Well, I would only have to refer to other contexts where such things have happened. We've seen in the past in countries where elections have led to situations such as these, that some people have found themselves facing justice in International Criminal Court and international tribunals. There is a mechanism under international law for violations if they are not addressed within the domestic jurisdictions for the international community to step in. We are not there yet. We are really at the starting point of this matter. We're speaking of reports. We don't even yet have concrete evidence of what happened in specific circumstances. What is not in doubt is that people have been killed. Now, the authorities have to take the first step to ensure justice. But where justice is not served in the domestic setting, there definitely are ways in the international system to bring people responsible for grave violations of international human rights law, international law in general, to court and to justice. And those avenues exist.
Safe, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for that update.
Thank you.
That's Saif Magango, who's a spokesperson for the UN Human Rights Office in Nairobi in Kenya, talking about these really disturbing developments that have played out in Tanzania. And one hopes that we get to the bottom of what a lot of people are terming Tanzania massacre on social media. As hundreds of people are believed to have been killed, bodies taken away by security officials, again, is being reported. But we wait and see what the story is in terms of its totality.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Deogratus Bwire, wewe kama mkurugenzi wa shirika la kutetea haki za binadamu kutoka kule Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Maandamano yameendelea kwa siku ya pili. Nini kinaendelea?
Kwanza mimi ningependa tusiliweke kama wafuasi wa upinzani. Kwa sababu kiukweli mimi nilipata kidogo kushuhudia watu waliokuwa wanapita barabarani hawakuwa kwa namna yoyote ile wamebeba bendera ya chama chochote cha upinzani.
Umezungumzia swala zima vitu ambavyo havijakaa sawa vinapaswa kurekebishwa. Vitu hivyo ni nini?
Hivyo vitu ambavyo havijakaa sawa tayari nimeshavisema huko. Najua kumekuwepo na mtiririko wa matukio mengi sana. Watu ambao wanakuwa wanapinga masuala kadha wa kadha ambayo yanaonekana kufanywa na vyombo vya dola kwenye mitandao au hata pia nje, wamekuwa wakichukuliwa hatua.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live 5 days a week.
17 minutes past 7 Central African time. Let's talk the UN Refugee Agency now. So the UNHCR and the International Telecommunications Union, or ITU, are stepping up efforts to ensure that millions of displaced people and their host communities are connected to the internet by 2030. The Connectivity for Refugees initiative, active in countries like Chad, Uganda, and Ethiopia, aims to make digital access a lifeline for education, health, and livelihoods. To tell us more about this and the recent joint ITU UNHCR GSMA visit to Chad, we're joined by Christine Sund, who is Senior Advisor and ITU Focal Point for the Connectivity for Refugees initiative. Christine, a very good morning to you. How are you this Wednesday?
Good morning, and thank you for having us in this discussion. We're really pleased to be with you this morning.
It's our pleasure, thanks. And let's start with the big picture in terms of why is digital connectivity such a critical issue for refugees and displaced communities in this day and age?
Yes, as you know, ITU is the UN Agency for Digital Technologies, and our mission is really to connect the world. And we do this with partners through managing the satellites up in space, allocating radio frequencies, spectrum, developing technical standards to enable that the services and devices are interoperable. And we also work to support countries with assistance on different digital policies and regulations to ensure that digital infrastructure is available and accessible. So this is really what ITU is all about, expanding connectivity and access to everyone. And we do this with partners, and that's really what this initiative is also at its core all about, really reaching those who are most in need of access, connectivity to services, information, health, education, and so forth.
So you've just returned from Chad, and what stood out to you the most about that visit? It was a joint initiative between the ITU, the UNHCR, and GSMSA, and you saw firsthand there what you needed to see.
Indeed, ITU was in Chad last week with our partners, the UN Agency for Refugees, UNHCR, the GSMA, as well as the government of Luxembourg. And we were there to advance our Connectivity for Refugees initiative. So this is an initiative to share with those who are listening to us that was born just about 2 years ago in a pledge to the Global Refugee Forum. And we came together with partners around a shared goal, and that was to advance connectivity for 20 million forcibly displaced people and their hosting communities by 2030. And I would say there are really many takeaways from the discussions that we held in Chad's capital, N'Djamena, and from engaging with local service providers, refugee students and entrepreneurs, and with community members in Farchana settlements, which is an area that's located in the east of Chad, close to the border with Sudan. And for example, we did visit a connected learning center in Farchana, which is supported by UNHCR, Luxembourg, and private sector partners like Cisco, where we sat down and we discussed learning objectives, but also future ambitions with the students. And there is just so much willingness to continue learning, even under such hard conditions and the circumstances that they are enduring when they are on the move, far away from their homes. And there is just so much hope for a better future.
So now, what other ways are you seeing being connected already making a difference? You cite the example there in the space of education. It gives them hope to continue on in their studies, and that's the positives you've seen. In any other ways, have you seen examples?
Indeed, we sat down also with a connected. We sat down with the local operators, Chad, Airtel, and Move, and they've really made a lot of infrastructure upgrades to help connect these very isolated areas in the east of the country. But they're still facing hurdles with regards to how to expand their services to reach these people who are in these settlements. And these were discussions that we held with them. We sat down and we also heard what is it really that we could also work with the government and its agencies and our partners to try to find solutions too. And these solutions are sometimes technical, maybe access to equipment, for example, and we can see what to do with regards to that. And sometimes there are really policy related, and then we can work with the government and its agencies to see how we can find solutions to those together with our partners and of course with the government.
So the Connectivity for Refugees initiative is active in places like Chad. We cited those examples, Uganda and Ethiopia. Where does the initiative aim to make digital access a reality next? We understand that the goal is to connect 20 million displaced people and host community members by 2030.
Yes, so we have a number of initiatives on the African continent, but we are also working with partners in other parts of the world. So here you cited Ethiopia, where I'm located. I'm connecting from ITU's regional office for Africa in Ethiopia at the moment, where there is also significant work undergoing with the government and with the stakeholders and with the private sector here, as well as Chad, Uganda. There is also a lot of work ongoing there. But at the core is really to look at, well, where are there challenges to meaningful connectivity that we can help address? So it's really an initiative that's very ambitious, 20 million refugees and their host communities. And this is really important as well. When bringing electricity, water, and connectivity to those very remote and rural areas, it's not only the refugees, but it's really also working very closely with the host communities and ensuring that we establish connectivity solutions that are sustainable for the long run as well in these communities.
What's the kind of support that is needed, and especially investment, to make this goal a reality?
Yes, I would really say that because we are looking holistically at meaningful connectivity. So at the core, of course, there is the availability of the access. In many of these refugee hosting areas, there is simply no access to the internet or access to sustainable electricity to have this connectivity and to have electricity in these communities. So that's really one of the core and making core aspects that we are looking for investments and support for, to putting in place sustainable connectivity solutions, and also ensuring that that access has good quality and that it's reliable enough for people to take advantage of the opportunities that the internet offers. And we mentioned earlier, of course, access to education while you're on the move, access to health information, being able to be in touch with your loved ones. And another very important aspect is on affordability. Connectivity really needs to be available at prices that people who use this connectivity can afford. And this is not necessarily the case. So that's one area that we really look forward to support, to see how we can bring the connectivity of access and also and the access to devices available for those who need it. Because to access the internet, you need to have a device like a phone or a tablet or a computer. And this is not always the case for those who are fleeing their homes and the host communities. So this is also another area.
Christine, thank you so much again for your time, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Sund is Senior Advisor and ITU Focal Point for the Connectivity for Refugees initiative.
Israel says that it's eager for peace and needs peace to continue for its people's livelihoods and development. Now, the president of the State of Israel, Isaac Herzog, was speaking from Lusaka, Zambia's capital, where he's been on a 2-day state visit. Our Zambia correspondent is Arthur Davis Scorpo.
Whenever the name Israel is mentioned, to many, the Bible and Christianity comes into mind. But equally to others, an ending war is what stands out first. Well, whatever the context, key is that Israelis are very good in technology, architecture, agriculture, among other forms of development. But certainly, instability in that region is what threatens development. And today, Israeli president says, indeed, they are eager for peace.
We are eager for peace. We want to see peace. Just like you are all encouraging us to do. And I want to thank you for your support for Israel in the plight for peace.
He is speaking in Lusaka on his 2-day state visit as he meets his Zambian counterpart, Hakainde Hichilema, the Israeli community living in Zambia, the business world, and Zambians in general. Hichilema has praised the ceasefire in the war in that region. And President Herzog Isaac is happy that progress has been made and hopeful that total peace returns, especially following the recent developments pushed by President Donald Trump of the United States of America.
We had to fight the empire of evil emanating from Tehran from 7 corners of the earth. We are protecting the civilized world and the free world by our plight. I want to thank the United States President Donald Trump for his immense leadership, for bringing about this ceasefire agreement and bringing back most of our hostages, the last one being Lieutenant Hadar Golden, whose body has been held by Hamas since 2014. We're all very moved by it in Israel, and we hope to see all of our hostages, all of them, being brought back as soon as possible.
The visit is seeing affirmation from both countries, Zambia and Israel, on their commitment to enhance their existing bilateral relations. Some of the critical areas the two presidents, Zambia's Hakainde Hichilema and Israel's Isaac Herzog, focus on strengthening collaboration in agriculture, health, education and technology, as well as trade and investments.
We want to move very, very rapidly in putting close to 500,000 hectares of our land under irrigation, and our cooperation means a lot in this area, so we can have food security, not just for ourselves, but for the region as well.
President Herzog praised Zambia for its peace and stability, and always being there to render help to the world. He is also encouraging Israelis around the world to get in to invest in Zambia, as it was a fertile ground for investment. Few months ago, Israel reopened its embassy in Lusaka after about 5 decades of closure, a thing both Presidents Hichilema and his Israeli counterpart Herzog believe is one strengthening factors to the two countries' diplomatic relations.
Zambia is also home to one of the oldest Jewish communities in Africa, and who are present here. Jews were very active in Zambian nation building and in its economic and political life.
That after independence, we embarked on building the first university in this country, the University of Zambia. Many young Zambians are not aware that the University of Zambia was built by Israelis.
President Herzog is expected to depart Zambia upon conclusion of his 2-day official program. Reporting for Channel Africa in Lusaka, Zambia, I'm Arthur Davis, Scopo.
Right, and let's catch you up with the news headlines. Here's Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
The United Nations has called on Libya to close detention centers where rights groups say that migrants and refugees have been tortured, abused, and sometimes killed. Ethiopia says that it will host the United Nations COP32 climate summit in 2027, fending off a rival bid from Nigeria to lend an influential role that will allow it to shape the agenda and outcomes of the event. And dozens of indigenous protesters carrying batons have forced their way into the venue hosting the COP30 climate talks in Brazil. I'll have the details at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now let's check in with what's happening with the world of sports. We say good morning to Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Asanda. We kick off with rugby news. The Springboks lured Diaga will play no further part in South Africa's Nations Series campaign. The 32-year-old received a 4-match ban for foul play in his side's 32-17 win over France last weekend. Diaga was given a straight red card by referee Angus Gardner after his shoulder made contact with Thomas Ramos' head in the 40th minute of the match. On Tuesday, a statement revealed that the disciplinary committee has upheld the red card issued to the player. Diaga's ban will reduce to 3 matches if he completes World Rugby's coaching intervention program. However, he will still miss the Springboks' upcoming matches against Italy, Ireland and Wales. On to football news. The Zimbabwe Football Association, ZIFA, revealed why 3 former PSL, that's Premier Soccer League stars, were left out of the latest squad. Zimbabwe announced the squad for 2 international friendlies against Algeria and Qatar in the November international break. It was the first squad announced by new head coach Marian Marinica, who replaced Michael Nies following a disappointing World Cup qualifying campaign. The association explained that Kama Billiard was left out of the squad due to personal reasons, and Knowledge Musona, who recently won his first league title in Zimbabwe with Scotland FC, was omitted because of a hamstring injury. Despite the setbacks, Marinica is using the 2 friendlies as preparation for Zimbabwe's 2025 Africa Cup of Nations campaign. On to cricket news. Proteas left-arm spinner Keshav Maharaj says the team is determined to end their long winless run in India when they face the hosts in the first of the 2 matches starting this Friday. The last time South Africa managed to overcome the Indians in their own backyard was in February 2010 in Nagpur.
I think firstly there's a real hunger and desire within the camp to obviously beat India, and India it's probably one of the toughest tours, if not the toughest tour in the Proteas calendar, through various generations that has come. And some people have been fortunate enough to cross that hurdle, but we as a unit, we feel like it's one of our biggest tests, and it will be a wonderful opportunity to grade ourselves to see how far we've come. Slowly but surely we started to conquer the sub in other conditions, other parts of the subcontinent. And I feel like this is one assignment that we really, really want to take.
Finally, with tennis news, after Alex de Minaur snatched defeat from the jaws of victory in a devastating loss to Italian Lorenzo Musetti at the ATP finals, the Australian said he cannot go on failing that way. De Minaur battled back from going 1 set down to force a decider, where he held a 5-3 lead, only for Musetti to win 4 games in succession in an incredible round-robin match in Turin that the Italian won 7-5, 3-6 and 7-5. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Muranziwa wa mina. Muranziwa means my love in Xitsonga. So if you're listening to this, just know that you are my love. Yes. You and I are in item. We're dating. We are together. So I love you, baby. Why are you blushing? Why are you blushing? Like, haven't you heard somebody confessing their love to you? I mean, you gotta get used to it now, because I'm gonna tell you this every day, that I love you. I can tell you, there are so many people who are never told they are loved. I come to the studio every Monday, 12 to 3, because I've got an appointment with you. I take you serious. Forget about the other person, right? Moranziwa.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Every voice matters. Every moment counts. Celebrate life with Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Now in your pocket.
Now it's time to find out what's happening in the world of business, and we say good morning to Nosipo Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news, the SAWA, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, has called on Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana to table a concrete medium-term budget policy statement that will protect workers in struggling industries. Godongwana will table the 2025 budget policy statement in Parliament this afternoon. COSATU's parliamentary coordinator Matthew Parks says there's a need for intervention in keeping depressed businesses afloat.
There needs to be additional measures to intervene to provide relief to struggling businesses and economic sectors and workers. These need to come in the form of tax rebates, industrial subsidies, and fixing the unemployment insurance fund TERS scheme. We need to make sure that the positive infrastructure allocations can be expedited, that additional support be given to Eskom, to Transnet, to Metro Rail, to other SOEs which are key to unlocking the economy.
The Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa has urged the government not to continue with the proposed tax law amendments in their current form. Finance Minister Ndoro is preparing to deliver his medium-term budget policy statement today. Treasury is proposing VAT amendments that could affect schools that offer services such as renting their facilities, running tuck shops and others. The law proposes that if revenue from these services is above $58,000 annually, schools are obliged to register as VAT vendors. Some role players have stressed that the amendments will also push up fees. Lebogang Monjani is the executive director of the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa.
The impact is that it will increase fees for many member schools. And the difficulty with fee increases that increase too high is this. Education inflation is always higher than national inflation. So really it is important that this proposal not go through.
The VAT amendment is proposed to come into effect on the 1st of January next year. Tax expert Diego Mogobo says this could have major financial implications for schools.
When the tax practitioner is doing calculation, he's going to use the methodology of proportionate and see how many percent is things called commercial. And then based on that, let's say it's 95% commercial. And then he's going to calculate based on that. And then he's going to deduct the input. And then the school will have to pay SARS.
Zambia and Israel have reaffirmed their commitment to enhance existing bilateral relations. President Isaac Herzog met his Zambian counterpart, Hakainde Hichilema, on Monday in Lusaka, becoming the first Israeli president to visit the Southern African country. Now, among other things, the two discussed ways to strengthen collaboration in agriculture and technology, trade and investment. President Hichilema explains.
We want to move very, very rapidly in putting close to 500,000 hectares of our land under irrigation, and our cooperation means a lot in this area. So we can have food security, not just for ourselves, but for the region as well.
And finally, the rate of UK unemployment has risen to 5% in the 3 months to September, showing signs that the jobs market has weakened. The Office for National Statistics says this is the highest rate since the period covering December 2020 to February 2021, boosting expectations of a December interest rate cut. The increase in the unemployment rate was higher than expected, coming in above the 4.9% projected by many analysts ahead of the budget on the 26th of November. Average wage growth was 4.6% in the third quarter, down from 4.7% over the 3 months to August. Your financial indicators: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 435. In Botswana is 13 bula 26. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 35, and in Zambia it's 22 kwacha 61. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 32. Russia is 80 rubles 86. India it's 88 rupees 68. China at 7 yuan 12. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 20. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,124 and platinum at $1,582 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.06 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Posoma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. This is
Channel Africa.
As South Africans look ahead to 2026, new research by Marriott Bonvoy reveals a wave of optimism among travelers, with more people planning to travel than in previous years. The findings were unveiled at an event held in Johannesburg, highlighting how artificial intelligence, luxury escapes, and passion-driven trips are shaping the future of travel. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange attended the event and filed this report for us.
According to Marriott Bonvoy's latest ticket to travel research, nearly 7 in 10 South Africans plan to take more or the same number of holidays in 2026 compared to this year. Dr. Dlamini Mbele, Senior Director for Commercial Sub-Saharan Africa at Marriott International, says the findings show an exciting shift in how South Africans are approaching travel.
If we look from a South African perspective, I think what's really interesting is that 69% of South Africans say that they want to travel a little bit more than what they did this year. The exciting part of the stats is that 49% of South Africans say they'll travel a little bit more next year than they did this year. Now, to put that into perspective, they are looking to do at least 6 holidays in a year, which means potentially every second month. Some South Africans are looking to travel. Isn't that interesting?
The research also reveals that travel in 2026 will be more meaningful, with many travelers seeking deeper connections and shared experiences with loved ones.
And what we also learned during the research as well is that South Africans are actually not just going to a holiday for the sake of a holiday. They're actually looking for deeper connection. And when you look at who do they want to travel to, they want to spend more time with their family or extended family. Again, spending these moments, bonding and sharing these special memories together.
Technology is also reshaping how South Africans plan their trips. The research shows that nearly half of travelers are now turning to artificial intelligence to research and plan their holidays, from finding inspiration to finalizing bookings. According to Dlamini Mbele, AI is fast becoming an essential travel companion.
So one of the biggest trends that came about is that how South Africans are using the AI as part of their planning process and using it as a planning tool to plan their holidays. AI has now become a go-to place for South Africans. Nearly half of South Africans have already used AI to help them plan their holiday. You can imagine starting off from the inspiration, also kind of researching, place that you want to go to or the experience you want to have, and then ultimately planning it. It just provides great efficiency as well.
And while technology is transforming travel planning, culinary experiences continue to play a big role in what South Africans enjoy most about their holidays. Chef Melusi Twala, head chef at Marriott Hotel International, says South Africans have a taste for global flavors that range from classic European dishes to bold Asian cuisines.
Yeah, the first dish, I think it's the beef Wellington that they enjoy going into. And then your pastas. Italians have made such a huge mark and just making a simple dish with just tomato and onion, and then with flour and egg to make the pasta and the pizzas. Your Asia. South African love because it's infused with so much flavors, sesame seeds, the different kinds of oil, marines.
The Marriott 2026 Travel Trends Report paints a picture of optimism, with travelers seeking meaningful experiences, exploring new destinations, and embracing both luxury and technology. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
COP30 is now underway in Belém in Brazil, and the pressure is on world leaders to move from promises to real climate action. Now, this year's summit is shaping up to be especially important for Africa, with adaptation, climate financing and loss and damage all high on the agenda. Early signs from the pre-COP Leaders Summit suggest that a strong push for clearer commitments on funding support for vulnerable countries and a new framework to help communities already living with the worst effects of climate change Well, to make sense of what's at stake and what Africa should be watching for, I spoke to Dr. Enoch Sitole, who's a publisher of the climate change newsletter, Climate Current, and I began by asking him what the main issues are on the table at this year's COP30.
There are four issues basically that have been jotted down on the agenda of the summit. The first one is to shift the climate financial system. At the previous COP, which was COP29 that was held in Baku in Azerbaijan, it was agreed that $1.3 trillion should be raised for climate action in developing countries. So at this summit, the leaders have discussed and agreed, but I think there'll be more negotiations as we go along. I expect NGOs and activists to probably fight for more at the conversations, but that is what is one of the priorities of the conference. The second one is to set up a climate resilience fund. And that is very important for Africa because although the continent emits less carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, the continent is most affected by the effects of climate change. So in Africa, we need a lot of money to be able to build resilience to climate change. And that resilience is through improving infrastructure, changing our economies, so that we can withstand the various impacts of climate change. It is said that Africa has a shortfall of some $365 billion per year to fund climate resistance. And there's a realization now that climate resilience is good because every dollar that is spent on preparing for adaptation creates more than $10 in benefits. So you invest $1, you get $10 in benefits in terms of saving people from drying, saving infrastructure, helping agriculture perform even in conditions of droughts or floods, etc. So this summit is going to discuss that there should be a fund dedicated to climate resistance. The third one is that all countries of the world that are members of the United Nations framework on climate change are expected to submit to the UN their plans with regards to fighting climate change, which are called Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs. What is of concern is that by September, which is just about a month and a few days ago, only 64 countries had submitted their NDCs, their nationally determined contributions, which means if they implemented their promised contributions, they would only cover 30% of the emissions. And we need a lot more countries to come forward to contribute to the cutting of emissions so that we can meet the Paris Agreement commitment of limiting warming by 1.5 degrees centigrade. Without those commitments, we're not going to meet the Paris Agreement commitments, and so much so that the United States has pulled out. The United States is no longer part of this, so they are not going to be bringing down their emissions, and that will make it difficult for the world to meet the Paris Agreement. So in Brazil now, they will discuss what to do about this. What are countries saying? Are they bringing forward ideas and commitments to cut down emissions? Because if they don't cut down emissions, we will be in a worse positions in years to come. COP30 will also discuss ways to protect and restore nature and transform food systems. There'll be discussions on how food is produced and on slashing food waste and shift to more plant-rich diets. They are going to be discussing that to ensure that everybody benefits from the food that the world is able to produce, than a situation like now where many countries actually throw away a lot of food while people in other countries don't have enough to eat.
So the Pre-COPs Leader Summit has already produced some decisions and some signals. What has stood out for you so far from those early discussions?
The first one is the fact that a document that was first discussed in Baku has already been agreed to. The contents of the document are that there should be $1.3 trillion that should be raised from governments and the private sector to help with fighting the effects of climate change, particularly in developing countries. That money should be raised between now and 2035.
So many African countries are already facing catastrophic climate impacts, and I wonder what kind of adaptation commitments would actually make a difference on the ground.
What we need is financing. Adaptation in our context means building infrastructure that is going to withstand the kind of impact of climate change that Africa faces. For example, storms that produce flooding. Even in South Africa, that is a country that's a little more developed than most African countries, we struggle with that. I'm sure we are aware, we still remember what happened in Durban in 2022, where, infrastructure just couldn't cope with the floods and many people died. So we need that funding to be able to build our infrastructure to resist the effects of climate change. Secondly, we need funding. There are areas, while we have the Durbans of this world having floods, there are areas, for example, in Western South Africa, in the Northern Cape, where there's been an ongoing drought, the same that has been happening in parts of East Africa, particularly in southern Ethiopia and Somalia. There's been an ongoing drought there where people are not able to produce any food in any meaningful way. So we need money to be able to build resistance for that. I'm not sure what can be done there, but scientists would be able to tell us what is to be done in terms of building resilience against droughts. Our economies, our manufacturing is sometimes not resilient to climate change. So we need funding to transform even our industries to be able to resist the impacts of climate change.
Some African governments are saying that, look, we need space to industrialize using fossil fuels. This is a luxury that the West has had, and we need to be able to still do this. Others are saying that they need faster transition. How is this debate playing out at COP level at this time?
I haven't read anything that suggests that debate has emerged, but I think many African countries will go back to it. What is interesting, though, is that from the 4 priorities of this summit, there is very little discussion, or there are no provisions for discussions on emissions, like in other COPs, like say the Paris Agreement COP, where we're talking cuts in emissions. In this COP, that item is not very strong, but I think African countries will come up with some such issues to be discussed. I agree to some extent that African countries need fossil fuels to develop. For example, they have suggested gas, which is a lower carbon emitter than coal, should be used. But on the other hand, I still think that we Africans need to be even more committed to cut emissions, because we are the victims. If you look at what is happening now, as I was talking about East Africa and the desertification up in West Africa, we are the victims of the effects of climate change. Therefore, it is in our interest to ensure that climate change is reversed. But the argument that we need fossil fuels to power our economies is also very valid. So what might have to be a middle meeting ground would be for Western nations to help African countries transition from fossil fuels based economies to green economies, but that requires money. So if the Western countries or the countries of the North are not going to come up with the money, it will be very difficult to build and sustain the argument that they must just abandon fossil fuels and sort of go back into poverty. I mean, some countries like Mozambique, Uganda, etc., have just discovered oil and gas, and they think that with those commodities, they can power their economies and even use the money to build resistance to climate change. So if you remove that from them, they are saying, basically, you are sending us back to zero, and you must bring in money. And if the countries of the North won't bring the money, then we have a deadlock. So something must be done. I mean, both arguments are correct, but we can't push fossil fuels a lot and at the same time think that we're going to have less effects of climate change. It's not going to happen. Fossil fuels must be reduced. We must transition to a carbon neutral economy. And for that to happen, we need money. We're not going to switch off our production and use of fossil fuels unless we've got alternative ways of living, basically.
That was Dr. Enoch Sitole, publisher of the Climate Change newsletter, Climate Current, speaking to us about COP30 and what it means for Africa.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Yes, it is 8 o'clock Central African time. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in and listening to Rise and Shine for this, the third hour of the Wednesday edition, broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg in South Africa. And you can catch us on www.channelafrica.co.za or on your mobile app. Just go into your app store, look for SABC Plus and then for Channel Africa, and you can take us wherever you go. My name is Peter Ndoro.
And my name is Asanda Beda. In this hour, we look at Africa's quest for health sovereignty and self-sufficiency in medical product manufacturing. A seminar is taking place. It ends tomorrow. It's happening in Kenya. And this is going to be the 7th Scientific Conference on Medical Product Regulation in Africa. We discussed that with our guest, who's a Senior Program Officer for African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization at ODA NEPAD. That is the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. And then we'll touch again on that COP30 story, getting different analysis. Lots of that. I mean, those two and lots more coming up in this hour. Let's get our news update first. Here's Nolutando Butelezi, and then we'll get a snippet in terms of what's happening in the world of sports from Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. Women are fleeing Sudan's Al-Fashir city amid reports of killings, systematic rape and the disappearance of children. This follows the region's capture by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Al-Fashir's fall on the 26th of October has cemented the RSF's control of the Darfur region in its 2.5-year war with the Sudanese army. People fleeing the city have described civilians being shot in the streets and attacked in drone strikes. The UN Women Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, Anna Mutavati, says that there is mounting evidence that rape is being deliberately and systematically used as a weapon of war. She expressed concern over the lack of safe spaces and the limited access to even the most basic psychosocial care. Ethiopia says that it will host the United Nations COP32 climate summit in 2027, fending off a rival bid from Nigeria to lend an influential role that will allow it to shape the agenda and outcomes of the event. The more immediate choice to host the next year's COP31 remains unresolved. However, both Australia and Turkey are vying for it. COP host countries adopt presidency. They adopt presidency, and it allows them to set goals for the summit and to showcase their own climate issues, as well as an important position in resolving any conflicts that arise during negotiations. At a plenary session of this year's event in Brazil, Ethiopia confirmed that it had been endorsed by fellow African nations to hold the 2027 conference in its capital, Addis Ababa. The United Nations Human Rights Office says that it believes hundreds of people were killed in Tanzania in protests that erupted during last month's elections. It also says that an unknown number were injured or detained. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner after garnering nearly 98% of the vote. BBC's Bernadette Kewa reports.
Tanzania's opposition has slammed last month's vote as a sham. President Samia faced little opposition after her two leading challengers were disqualified. The UN Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, said there were reports security forces had removed bodies from streets and hospitals and taken them to undisclosed locations in an attempt to conceal evidence. He called on the authorities to provide information about the whereabouts of all the missing, to hand over bodies and hold those responsible for human rights violations to account.
Dozens of indigenous protesters carrying batons have forced their way into the venue hosting the COP30 climate talks. They chanted slogans about indigenous land rights and clashed with security guards as well as local police at the entrance to the convention center in Brazil. The BBC's Esme Stallard reports.
Videos have started to appear on social media, which show a group of indigenous protesters marching from the city of Belém through to the entrance to this venue. We can then see in the videos that they kick down the doors and attempt to storm the entrance. At that point, they're met by local police and UN security who attempt to push them back. Witnesses say that they saw a security guard being wheeled away in a wheelchair, clutching his stomach, and that another security guard reported being hit by an object from the crowd.
For any news stories that you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Amajimbo's World Cup opponents have been revealed, and Keshaf Maharaj says the Proteas have hunger and desire to beat India in India. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Africa's quest for health sovereignty and self-sufficiency in medical product manufacturing. This is what we are discussing this morning as the 7th Scientific Conference on Medical Product Regulation in Africa is meeting in Mombasa, Kenya. The summit is looking at how Africa can produce its own medicine. The continent currently imports over 90% of medicines, and over-reliance on external supply chains that leaves Africa vulnerable. The conference, which ends tomorrow, is where the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, or AODA NEPAD, and its partners will define the next phase of a future of medicines production in Africa. To discuss this further, we're now joined by Alex Juma Ismail, who is Senior Program Officer for African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization, or AMRH, at AODA NEPAD, the facilitators of this conference. Alex, a good morning to you and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So the Conference on Medical Products Regulation in Africa, or SCOMBRA, is now in its 7th year. What will form part of this year's agenda?
This year's agenda is mainly, we are looking at trade through local production and harmonization of requirements for medical products in Africa. And we have 3 days of conference conference where these three themes of this year's conference, also bringing together, these experts from across the continent, leaders, and they're spread across fields of expertise. We have manufacturers, we have regulators, we have industry, and also we have policymakers from the African Union Commission and also from the member states of the AU to discuss and forge a way forward and agree on important things that will be implemented as we are transitioning from a program of harmonization to a continental agency which came into operation in 2021.
Why is it important for the continent to produce its own medicines, and what are the impediments for us reaching this goal? What factors contribute to the slow pace of Africa's ability to do this?
As you indicated, Africa imports over 90% of its medicines and over 99% of its vaccines. And we saw during COVID, if we, God forbid, we are in a position where we are facing another pandemic, then continent will not be sufficient to secure the public health of its people. So the African Union has been very deliberate in these efforts. We are looking at producing. So we established what we call the Partnership for Vaccines Manufacturing in Africa, PAVM, and also the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa. And in terms of vaccines, we are looking at producing at least 60% of the needs by 2040. It's a very ambitious goal, but the entire continent is very deliberate, and we want to ensure that we are secured when it comes to these essential medicinal and medical products on the continent.
So who is going to be in attendance at the conference to participate?
So we are hosted by the government of Kenya, the Ministry of Health, and it is being represented here by the Farmers and Forests Board. We also have in attendance representatives of the head of state, Honorable President of Kenya, will be represented. We have the chairperson of the African Medicines Agency Governing Board. We have the Director General of the African Medicines Agency, Chief Executive Officer, Auda Nepad, Continental Development Agency. We have heads of agencies. These are agencies responsible for medical products regulation Africa. We also have representative of international industries, manufacturing industry, also local manufacturers from within the continent, academia, and other policymakers representing other international organizations. So we have almost everyone participating in this conference this year.
What is the importance of regulatory systems in enabling the manufacturing of pharmaceutical plans for Africa, and how should they be strengthened?
So when you talk of regulatory systems, you're looking at an environment where the products that are being manufactured, before they are accessed by the people, they are of acceptable quality, safety, and efficacy. And having a well-integrated, strong or stringent system ensures that not just any products would reach the people, but the products that are of acceptable standards. And in Africa, when we started this pharmaceutical manufacturing in 2005, and the implementation at the time was decided to be a stepwise approach, where we realized without having an environment, regulatory environment that is speaking to each other, is well coordinated, and it's strong, it will be very difficult to realize this long-term manufacturing. So we created the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization 4 years after the adoption of this plan. And then we had an opportunity to bring all the countries in Africa to start harmonization of requirements. Meaning, so before 2009, what it meant is if a manufacturer, whether located in Africa or outside Africa, wants to have their product in African markets, they would have to navigate 55 different requirements and different systems, which is very time consuming, source intensive, and that would mean also prices and increasing cost of these medicines in the market. But now with the harmonization and creating a one block when it comes to regulatory requirements in Africa, that means there is a possibility, which has actually been proven, that you can have a single submission of the data from studies and the development of these products. You can have a single review, single inspection of the manufacturing site, and then have an outcome that will be applicable to multiple countries. So if the manufacturer is then interested in the entire continent, then one single review, one inspection, that would mean access to 55 markets. So this is a game changer. And we've seen this working with the pilot that we were running for the past 2-3 years. And so strengthening systems is something that is very critical. And for us to have functioning healthcare system, then it means we need to also have a functioning regulatory system that would allow for these products to circulate while maintaining their standards, quality, safety.
I mean, so that covers then what my next question was going to be in terms of how to harmonize within the different regions where these regulatory systems need to be implemented, the likes of the ECOWAS, the EACs, and the ECAS and the IGADs. But let's talk about capacity strengthening then over and above harmonization. How should those be implemented to make sure that these regulatory systems do get strengthened on the part of capacity?
So it's very important to have sustainable capacity development mechanisms or systems on the continent. And in Africa, we started with creating what we call regional centers of regulatory excellence, RCOs. These RCOs are either a combination of academia and institutions that are regulating medical products, or they could be just academia or individual organizations that are responsible for medical products. But since the creation, we created these RCOs in 2015. Since their creation, we've seen also a lot of challenges in terms of sustainable funding, and also keeping up to date with standards that are needed for these medical products. So what would be needed is to establish a well-coordinated, strong, and an integrated system on the continent. So realizing that, in addition to us creating these regional centers of excellence, then we created what we call a College for African Regulatory Science Professionals. So this college would have 3 things. One of its objectives is to accredit and recognize causes, capacity building initiatives, and all these capacity strengthening systems that are already existing in Africa. Secondly, is also have a recognition system of regulators themselves, and also recognizing the profession. Because one of the challenges that we have, regulatory science is a new profession. It has not been here for a long time, so now we want to also recognize it as a profession. You know, when you say you know a medical doctor or the pharmacist, recognize the system, and you are able to get credible experts in these systems. But for regulatory science, this has not been the case. Therefore, we want to now deliberately establish a college that will then bring together the regional centers of excellence and sustain these efforts that we have tried to establish since 2015 when we launched the regional center of excellence.
As you say, regulatory science is a relatively new field. So what global lessons can Africa leverage then when it comes to strengthening its own regulatory systems for medicine access, especially on the part of research?
Thank you very much. I think Africa, this is one point of advantage for Africa. We are coming into a space where the rest of the world has been implementing for many years. We have the first regulatory law was put forward, I think, in 1938 in the United States of America. And the USFDA in America has been regulating for over a century. So there are a lot of lessons that we can learn. And they've not only been regulating, but also they are implementing research as part of these science processes. The same also in Europe. Europe, they, I think, enacted their first law of regulating medical products in the 1960s. They created a continental system in 1995. And in addition to creating these systems, they also had research as part of these processes. So I think Africa should also go in the same direction, adopt this approach, but also learn. We do not need to learn the will. I think we can learn from these well-established global regulatory agencies, have not necessarily the same systems or the same modalities, maybe adapt them to our context. But a lot of things have been done across the globe. I think we can learn from those lessons. And we have started with creating the African Medicines Agency. Even in the creation of this agency, we are informed by research, science-based kind of intervention.
Alex, thank you so much again for your valuable insights. I'm sure you're busy over there, so let's let you go to continue with your agenda. And thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
That's Alex Juma Ismail, Senior Program Officer for African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization at the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, or ODA NEPAD. So the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization are facilitators of the SCOMBRA that's happening in Mombasa, Kenya, the Scientific Conference on Medical Product Regulation in Africa. Things have changed since COVID. Hey, we want to come up with our own solutions now when we saw the whole debacle of vaccines either being too slow to come into the continent or they come and they're about to expire in 2 weeks and the whole hula baloo.
Well, by and large, I think what it told us is that we underinvested and we relied heavily on aid. And as soon as the US started pulling its contributions, we were exposed. And as you said, COVID-19, we're at the mercy of others.
Yeah.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et les bons dieux pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
So as global leaders and negotiators gather in Brazil for COP30, the UN Climate Change Conference, scientists from Wits University in Johannesburg in South Africa are calling for a rethink on how natural climate solutions are implemented across Africa. In a new Nature Sustainability commentary, Professors Laura Pereira, Sally Archibald, Dr. Kim Zola, and 12 other African authors, co-authors, outline 6 guiding principles to ensure climate action benefits both people and the ecosystems. They warn that global projects all too often treat Africa as a blank slate, mislabeling healthy landscapes and degraded and applying one-size-fits-all fixes such as tree planting where they don't belong. Now, to discuss this Africa-centered approach and its relevance to COP30, we're now joined by Dr. Kim Zola, a postdoctoral researcher at the Global Change Institute at Wits University in Johannesburg. Dr. Zola, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to have a platform to put these ideas forward.
I'm fascinated about how you, as co-authors, came together. How did that happen? What did you see as a collective that needed to be addressed?
So fundamentally, Africa is treated as kind of a catch-all for climate mitigation efforts by the global north. And we identified that a lot of the solutions that are put forward aren't really appropriate for South Africa or African ecosystems. So as you mentioned, a lot of our grasslands are treated as degraded, where they're really intricate and functionally important ecosystems that if you plant trees, you might diminish their functional potential. So in conversation with our colleagues across the continent, we realized that we need to sort of have a platform on which to communicate these ideas. And it's important to note that these aren't just sort of theoretical concepts. These are based in science and academic literature. And our findings are really produced from Africa for African solutions.
Perhaps we can start unpacking some of these principles and explain why each one is important.
Sure, so I'll just talk you through each of them. So we have foundational principles, which include acknowledging Africa's development priorities and needs. And so as I mentioned, we know that there are these sort of global north priorities that are often imposed on African systems. And so it's important that climate and biodiversity goals align with Africa's agendas. And so this is really part of our main core message, is understanding our development priorities and needs. And then also ensuring that we allocate financial resources that produce co-benefits. So ensuring that our solutions aren't just appropriate for climate mitigation, carbon mitigation, but also can help communities and nature, and ensure that there isn't just a narrow profit-driven carbon market approach to supporting livelihoods, that we also just take communities into consideration. We also need to prioritize solutions that maintain options for the future. And this includes avoiding irreversible land use change and respecting indigenous and local knowledges that have co-evolved with these ecosystems over millennia. Importantly, we need to be transparent about trade-offs and community costs. And this is recognizing that not all natural climate solutions produce win-win-wins for nature, climate, and carbon. And we need to be transparent about the fact that there are some mitigation efforts that might cause harm to communities who rely on those systems, and ensure that everyone is fairly compensated. And part of this is our fifth solution, which is to ensure local buy-in and co-design, meaning that we need to engage with communities as equal partners in desired future ecosystem states. And so making sure that there is a continued effort to promote any solution that we put forward in Africa. And finally, we need to use African-specific data. Oftentimes, we don't engage with what we have around us, and global data sets can misinterpret African conditions. And so we need to fill these gaps with African-specific data and contexts.
I'm fascinated with the aspect of local buy-in. I'm also mindful that ecosystems don't know borders, and so I reckon cross-border Pan-African buy-in is required. How united is Africa's position, or is there a lot of work to be done there, do you think, especially given the conversations you've had with your co-authors?
I mean, we have a cohesive development outlook in our African agenda, but I think COP is also an incredibly important platform to have this discussion, because it is being held in Brazil, which is a tropical rainforest. And, it gives us insight into stopping emissions at their source, but also ensuring that any sort of solutions that flow into Africa or into the Global South have being rooted in African and Global South priorities. The question about whether or not it's feasible, whether there's a cohesive and unified message in Africa, I think is something we really need to push. And just making sure the message is clear that climate mitigation, of course, is really important, but Africa is also not the main emitter. We need to understand adaptation goals as well. And our colleagues who contributed to this paper are far-reaching across the African continent, and we came to an easy consensus on these principles. And we're hoping that they can follow through to the good negotiators, but they need to stand on African development goals.
You mentioned also relying on African-specific data sets. How good are we at collecting the data, and also where are the gaps that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, I've read so many papers that have identified Africa as data gapped, as a data gapped continent, which really, if you look at what's going on in the continent, isn't a fair representation. The current project that I'm in at WITS is, again, continent-wide and filling a lot of these data gaps, but also ensuring that we have a database that allows easy access to these data, because often they're fragmented, are telling different stories, and people aren't talking to each other about what's available. Our colleague who is in Brazil at the moment attending COP is also the chair of a synthesis group that focuses on carbon, livelihoods, and biodiversity in ocean ecosystems. And so the idea is to identify the multitude of data that exists on the continent and put it together in a cohesive way that helps us synthesize what's available and what kind of questions we can ask given the data. So yeah, there's definitely investment needed to ensure we have more research data, but at the moment we're not as data poor as I think is being unfairly represented.
Okay, so COP30 is underway in Brazil right now. 6 guidelines. If you had to choose one that perhaps might make the most significant change, which one should be prioritized, do you think?
I think being transparent about the feasibility of natural climate solutions and the trade-offs that they necessarily create. As I mentioned, once you have implemented a natural climate solution, it oftentimes for local communities is not a win-win-win. And so when you have buy-in from communities, you are able to ensure longevity of these natural climate solutions and ensure that while you are accounting for carbon mitigation, you're also being transparent about the true costs. So for example, if you are promoting tree planting in a grassland, what is being lost by communities who rely on these grasslands, and what is being lost for biodiversity for these rare plant species who live there, or the herbivores that rely on grasslands to survive. So just being really transparent about the true accounting costs of these interventions.
Kim, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for the important work that you're doing, you and your co-authors. Do not tire doing good. Thanks so much indeed for your efforts.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to talk to you.
That was Dr. Kim Zola, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the Global Change Institute at Wits University, coming up with some very important guidelines, I think, that we should take very seriously, and hope that gets some energy, because they could be game changers for us. It's 8:30, which means it's time for your news headlines. Good morning to Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
The United Nations is calling on Libya to close detention centers where rights groups say that migrants and refugees have been tortured, abused, and sometimes killed. The city of Cape Town in South Africa is planning to provide alternative accommodation for over 200 foreign nationals displaced by a fire in Wingfield last week. And the Colombian army has carried out airstrikes against a rebel faction from the Revolutionary Armed Forces known as the FARC in the Amazon region. I'll have the details at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Now, let's check in with what's happening in the world of sports. We get a full update from Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And we begin with football news this hour. Vela Kumalo's Amajimbo's team have been drawn against Japan in the round of 32 at the ongoing FIFA Under-17 World Cup in Qatar. With all group games coming to an end today, or rather on Tuesday, South Africa, who finished second in Group A, were entered in the draw as the 11th seeded second-placed side. Japan were the winners of Group B and seeded 10th amongst the winners. 9 African teams have qualified for the round of 32, which kicks off on Friday, with Morocco coming from Japan's group. They lost 2-0 to Japan, 6-0 to Portugal, but qualified as one of the best third placed after beating New Caledonia 16-0, a new record win at this level. Meanwhile, Japan somewhat surprisingly only drew 0-0 with New Caledonia, but beat Portugal 2-1 to top Group B. On to rugby news, Springbok lock Luod Diaga will play no further part in South Africa's Nations Series campaign. A 32-year-old received a 4-match ban for foul play in his side's 32-17 win over France last weekend. Diaga was given a straight red card by referee Angus Gardner after his shoulder made contact with Thomas Ramos's head in the 40th minute of the match. On Tuesday, a statement revealed that the disciplinary committee has upheld the red card issued to the player. Diaga's ban will be reduced to 3 matches if he completes World Rugby's coaching intervention program. However, he will still miss the Springboks' upcoming matches against Italy, Ireland and Wales. Now, cricket news. Proteas left-arm spinner Keshav Maharaj says the team is determined to end their long winless run in India when they face the host in the first of the 2 matches starting on Friday. The last time South Africa managed to overcome the Indians in their own backyard was in February 2010 in Nagpur.
I think firstly there's a real hunger and desire within the camp to obviously beat India, and India it's probably one of the toughest tours, if not the toughest tour in the Proteas calendar, through various generations that has come. And, some people have been fortunate enough to cross that hurdle. But we as a unit, we feel like it's one of our biggest tests. And it will be a wonderful opportunity to grade ourselves, to see how far we've come. Slowly but surely, we started to conquer the sub in other conditions, other parts of the subcontinent. And I feel like this is one assignment that we really, really want to take.
Let's end with tennis news. Alex de Minaur snatched defeat from the jaws of victory in a devastating loss to Italian Lorenzo Musetti at the ATP finals. The Australian said he cannot go on failing like this. De Minaur battled back from going 1 set down to force a decider where he held a 5-3 lead, only for Musetti to win 4 games in succession in an incredible round-robin match in Turin that the Italian won 7-5, 3-6, 7-5. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Siyabangena manje. Vito Jabulani Nkolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
Where Africa's voices rise, with stories that matter, we lead the conversation.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
The African perspective, Asanda, Beda.
Yes.
I quite like that one, I must admit, that little jingle there. The African perspective.
Yeah.
I wish I could sing as well as them, though. Well, I tell you someone who can sing very well, but more speaking business news, is Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Peter, I cannot sing to save my life. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, has called on Finance Minister Ndoro to table a concrete medium-term budget policy statement that will protect workers and struggling industries. Now, Ndoro will table the 2025 budget policy statement in Parliament this afternoon. COSATU's parliamentary coordinator, Matthew Park, says there is a need for intervention in keeping depressed businesses afloat.
There needs to be additional measures to intervene to provide relief to struggling businesses and economic sectors and workers. These need to come in the form of tax rebates, industrial subsidies, and fixing the unemployment insurance fund TERS scheme. We need to make sure that the positive infrastructure allocations can be expedited, that additional support be given to Eskom, to Transnet, to Metro Rail, to other SOEs which are key to unlocking the economy.
Meanwhile, there is a cautious optimism among some South Africans ahead of Finance Minister Ndoro's 2025 midterm budget policy statement. Ndoro will provide an update on the country's economic performance in the budget, which he will table in Parliament this afternoon. An informal trader in Polokwane, Limpopo province, says he has stopped paying attention to the budget speech as it does not seek to improve the circumstances of informal business people. The informal trader near the Polokwane hospital believes that the budget overlooks the plight of hawkers.
At this present moment, I don't really believe that the government is spending money wisely because, our stalls, we are having some stalls here and then we are paying the municipality rent, their rates every month, but they are doing nothing. The only thing they do is just to receive the cash from us. We don't have toilets. We have nothing here, and we are saving the people. At the hospital, we have almost maybe more than 25 years selling in front of this hospital, Petersburg Hospital, but there is no improvement of services from the municipality.
A European Union naval mission has taken control of an Iranian-flagged dhow used by pirates last week to attack an oil products tanker off the coast of Somalia and later abandoned. A recent spate of attacks on vessels off the Horn of Africa, including the first in a year by suspected Somali pirates, has rekindled concerns over the security of shipping lanes carrying critical energy and goods to global markets. The EU says that the dhow crew is safe and in good condition, adding that it is working with Somali authorities to crack down the pirates. Oil prices are a little changed today after rising in the previous session. It comes amid expectations that an end to the longest ever U.S. government shutdown could boost demand in the world's biggest crude-consuming nation. Brent crude futures slipped 8 U.S. cents to $65.8 a barrel after gaining 1.7% on Tuesday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was down 7 cents to $60.97 a barrel after climbing 1.5% in the previous session. And finally, Turkish telecoms operator Turkcell has signed an agreement with Google for strategic cooperation on cloud technologies. In the statement, Turkcell says that it will expand its data center infrastructure. It also says it plans to invest $1 billion until the end of 2032 as part of the deal. Your financial indicators: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 435. In Botswana is 13.26. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 35, and in Zambia it's 22.61. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5.32. Russia is 80 rubles 86. India is 88 rupees 68. China at 7 yuan 12. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 20. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities: gold is trading at $4,124 and platinum at $1,582 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.06 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosiposoma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
China has reaffirmed its ongoing support for South Africa's presidency of the G20 following reports that the United States has withdrawn from the upcoming summit. Speaking at the launch of a new book titled Xi Jinping and the Global South in Pretoria, authored by Professor David Munyae from the University of Johannesburg, Chinese ambassador to South Africa Wu Peng said Beijing has backed South Africa's G20 leadership from the very beginning of the year. He confirmed that senior Chinese leaders will attend the historic gathering, the first G20 summit to be held on African soil, and emphasized that the meeting should champion equality, sustainability, and justice in global governance, amplifying the collective voice of the Global South. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Bewe filed this report.
As South Africa's G20 Leaders Summit draws nearer, the Chinese ambassador to South Africa, Wu Peng, has emphasized China's unwavering support for South Africa's G20 presidency, describing it as a pivotal moment for the Global South to assert its influence on global governance despite reports of the United States withdrawing from the summit. Held under the theme Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability, this will be the first ever G20 summit to be held on the African continent. Speaking during the launch of the book Xi Jinping and Global South, a book that seeks to deepen South-to-South ties with China, Ambassador Peng said China is fully behind South Africa's G20, confirming senior officials' attendance.
In about 10 days, the G20 summit will open in Johannesburg. This will be the first G20 summit held on the Africa continent. Of course, in recent news, we all heard that maybe someone will be coming and someone will not. However, China formally supports South Africa's G20 presidency from the very beginning of this year, including we will send senior leaders of China to present in Johannesburg.
Peng said China will work with South Africa to champion equality, sustainability and justice, a theme adopted by many nations aimed at delivering a strong Global South voice on global governance at the summit.
And we also work with South Africa together. And among majority of the member of G20, for the equality, sustainability, and justice. This reform of the global governance is the main theme of this year's G20. Also, some people don't agree, but from the very beginning, that is the consensus reached by G20 members, and South Africa play a leading role. We must respect it. That is the rule of how to operate G20. And we look forward to this summit sending out a strong voice of Global South on global governance.
He noted that many countries belong to the Global South with a huge population and its development as a sign of strength, as a catalyst and contributor towards a multipolar world.
Today, more than 130 countries belong to the group of Global South. They accounted for about 80% of today's world population and over 40% of GDP. Look, our strength is not matched. On average, developing economies are growing faster than developed ones. We can say that the Global South is no longer the silent majority of the international system. It has already become an important force driving multipolarity, economic globalization, and the diversity of civilization. We all agree that global governance should represent true multilateralism.
In promoting the countries of the Global South, Ambassador Peng lauded 3 countries that are hosting major global multilateral platforms while calling China-Africa relations a win-win.
In the next few weeks, just as the Director mentioned, South Africa, Brazil, and Qatar as host will convey the G20 Summit, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, and the World Summit for Social Development. China formally supported these Global South countries in hosting these major events. Africa is the continent where developing countries are most concentrated. Together, China and Africa account for 1/3 of the world's population, 2.8 billion people. China-Africa cooperation is a fine example of equality and win-win cooperation among Global South countries.
Speaking on behalf of the government of South Africa, government's deputy spokesperson William Baloyi said the contents of the book resonates well with challenges faced by developing countries.
Your book, Prof. Xi Jinping and the Global South, provides an important examination of how President Xi Jinping's ideas and actions affect and resonate with developing countries looking for justice and a role in the international governance. That is Prof. It's not me. He continued to say, to further demonstrate the commitment, in 2013, President Xi Jinping took office and made it his mission of placing the Global South at the top of his international agenda.
The University of Johannesburg's Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation, Professor Refilwe Paswana Mafuya, weighed in on the book and made these remarks.
The book by Professor Munyai at a national level represents a macrocosm of the increasingly important relationship between South Africa and China. China is a force to be reckoned with.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
The Upside, taking the African perspective to fresh levels.
Them free when them buck up in a torture. Cause them I get torture.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to The Upside, Stone Boy!
More fire.
All things the torture. That's the name of the album.
You know, torture literally means that someone who bears a torch, like a torture, like not T-U-R, but T-O-R-C-H-E-R. So like it's a Statue of Liberty holding a torch, like keeping it burning, you know what I'm saying? Like it just implies the fact that we have to inspire one another. We have to tell it through the music and reach out to the people to know that, listen, you got light inside of you that has to bend. You know what I'm saying? Like keep it burning, like don't let nobody dim your shine.
The Upside, live and real. It's dynamic. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's find out about other stories that matter on Channel Africa as we say good morning to Benjamin. He's going to tell us what's coming up on The Move. Good morning, Benj.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Benjalash.
Hey, nice names, eh? Benjalicious.
Say it. You want to get in trouble, eh? I don't want to get in trouble.
You'll train for months.
How are you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Fantastic. Well, today we're going to be speaking about relationships, right? We love talking about relationships on the show. And we're going to be speaking about a relationship type that I have never tried to get into, you know. I've been adventurous in my relationships, but this one,
I sounds like polyandry.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Polyamory.
Polyamory.
Yeah, polyamory. Well, now you come from the Great Brits. Yeah, Konjoni, you've got that Great Brit accent.
Yeah, no, that's a difficult one, eh? Because there's always someone who eventually has a problem with it.
Okay, explain what it actually is.
So isn't it being in love with more than one person?
Yes.
At the same time.
At the same time.
So that's polyamory and polyandry?
Yes. I think it's marrying more than one person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Polygamous? And polyandry was a difference.
Anything that has a poly means there's more than one.
I think it's being, polyamory is, it's almost like this where everyone can be in relationship with other people.
Intersections kind of thing.
So you and I could be going out, but you're also dating someone else, and I'm also dating someone else.
But we consent to it.
Yes.
So we
yes,
know,
yes,
both of us, that
yes,
you know what, we are
yes,
consenting to have this kind of relationship.
Yes.
That's messy. That's too messy for me. No, thank you.
But if it's consensual, that's something else, isn't it? If everybody's on the same page with it.
When we start, we are going to be on the same page. But as time goes, things will change for sure.
How?
That's the chance.
Things change. Feelings get developed.
With the other person on the other side.
Whichever way, there's a mixed web.
Often starts to fall madly in love with the person. And then they become jealous about the time you're spending with someone else.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about, guys. Yeah. And other dangers around that, in terms of sexual health, how do you make sure that, there's that sexual safety
right.
in that? That's the big question that I had there. Like, how do you monitor that? How do you even police it as one of the partners? Maybe you might be concerned about your sexual health as well there.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
That takes trust on another level.
Yeah, it is. That's deep.
I think you almost have to all be friends, actually.
Does that not make it even worse if you know each other?
I don't know. I think it's safer when you know each other. It's when you don't know where the other person is. I don't know.
Alright, guys, you know what? Can I just remain traditional as far as possible? No, thank you. Wasn't one of the celebrities who came out on polyamory, Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith's daughter, who said that she's in that kind of a relationship.
And also, didn't at some point they say they had a polyamory relationship as well, Will Smith and Jada. Remember when everything just burst into...
I could see. What I do know, though, is that South Africa's job market is changing, at least in how it's being measured. But for millions of South Africans, the struggle to find work is real and is ever present. As of the third quarter, the country's unemployment rate stood at 31.9%, and that's a decline of 1.3% when compared with the previous quarter. And this means 8 million job seekers cannot find work with work in South Africa, making it one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Dimakatso Leshuro filed this report.
In the third quarter of 2025, South Africa's unemployment rate edged down slightly, but is still among the highest in the world. According to Statistics South Africa, the official unemployment rate now stands at 31.9%. That's 8 million people actively looking for work out of a labor force of just over 25 million. But for the first time, that headline number comes with a new set of categories, part of a broader international update to how labor data are reported. Risenga Maluleke is a statistician general.
Coming out of the international classification of 2023, that we will be putting a pilot in 2024 of the improvements that we would be making. And these improvements are not the first time we make.
Those improvements mean a more complete picture of jobs or lack thereof. StatusSA has now added what it calls time-related underemployment or underutilization and a new group called potential labor force. Soli Malai, the acting Deputy Director General for Population and Social Statistics at StatusSA, says these are people available for work but not actively looking.
The first indicator is the normal unemployment rate. I think that one is quite straightforward. The second one, we're just taking into account those who are working, but they are saying to us, we actually are available to work even more hours. And this indicator, we've been tracking it even from the previous quarters. So the third one, we're looking at the potential labor force. And the reason why the potential labor force, because these are the potential employees that can actually be part of your labor force. And we are unpacking them a little bit further to say those who are available and those who are not available, but they're seeking. So the indicators just give you a sense and a deeper understanding of your labor market.
Out of the working age population of 41.9 million, 25.1 million are in the labor force, of which 17.1 million were employed and 8 million are unemployed. That leaves 4.5 million of them in that new potential category, including 3.5 million discouraged work seekers. When these groups are added together, the picture darkens. The combined rate of unemployment and potential labor force rises to 42.4%, and the composite measure of labor underutilization, which adds part-timers who want more hours, climbs to 44.9%. In plain language, almost half of South Africa's working age people are either unemployed, underemployed, or available but not working, says Maluleke.
Our unemployment rate, as we have indicated, remains at 31.9% as the headline unemployment. And of course, the combined rate of unemployment and time-related underemployment takes the 8 million plus the 700,000 divided by the 25.1 million of people in the labor force out of the working age. And that returns a rate of 34.9%. The combined rate of unemployment and potential labor force is sitting at 42.9%.
Behind the formal statistics lies an economy that runs for many of the books. The informal labor market now employs about 4 million people, or 23% of total employment. Desiree Manamela, Chief Director of Labor Statistics, elaborates.
Now, we are saying that people that are in informal employment, they must have access to social insurance. In this case, we are talking about pension. And if a person that we interview says that they do not have access to pension, we go and ask them additional questions in terms of, do they have access to paid leave and sick leave? And the two must be available, both of them at the same time. So if it is no to those questions, then these people will be in informal employment.
These numbers are punctuated by the racial divide that remains stark as Black people continue to suffer the most from the lackluster economy, with an unemployment rate of 35.8%, well above the national average, while unemployment among white South Africans sits at just 8.1%. Statistix says most of the gains this quarter came from construction, which added 150,000 jobs, and community and social services, up 116,000, but manufacturing and finance lost tens of thousands of positions. Meanwhile, youth unemployment remains a national emergency. 58.5% for those aged 15 to 24 do not have jobs. So while the categories may have been tweaked, the story hasn't. Too few jobs and too many South Africans still searching for work or waiting for their chance to be counted. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimagadzo Leshoro in Johannesburg.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
And that's how we say goodbye. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And don't forget, On the Move coming up right after the news and sport headlines.
My name is Asanda, Beda. We'll be together tomorrow, 6 till 9. Let's send you over to the news desk now. And we say good morning to Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. The United Nations has called on Libya to close detention centers where rights groups say that migrants and refugees have been tortured, abused,